And we welcome you to another edition of This Is Wrestling. It is Versage, along with Zach friggin' McGibbon. I think he's still okay after people were taking shots at him after the last episode. I just wondered if his heart was okay, if he's back to a normal pace of life. Zach McGibbon, you're okay?
I'm doing good, Lee. I am calmed down. I am relaxed. Things are good. We are now a week out. As you mentioned, I did get some responses back to that episode. Some positive, some not as positive in terms of my review of the show. Some saying I was too harsh. Some saying that I did get one person that said that they still enjoyed the show, but they totally understood the points that we made and thought it was very entertaining, and he would consider himself more of a WWE fan, which I was like, all right, perfect. That's cool. Like, you don't have to agree with me, but at least you understand where I'm coming from. And then I had one person straight up accuse me of being on the AEW payroll. So that's how you and I actually, both you and I were on the AEW payroll.
Hold on. I gave it a solid 5.5 out of 10.
I know. You gave it a passing grade.
A passing grade.
Yes.
And,
but we're getting personal checks from Tony Khan now, even though I don't think we mentioned AEW one time during the review.
That's very hurtful.
Yeah.
So, to think that I'm on the AEW payroll.
Yeah, I think our AEW super fan that listens into the show, Ben Sublier, would very much disagree that we are on the AEW payroll, because we've also been critical.
But I feel like we're Dave Meltzer now, like defending our AEW payroll shtick. Like, isn't that his shtick?
That is his shtick. That is what that side, that fan base likes to put on Meltzer, that he's on the AEW payroll, and that he is doing PR work for them, even though, as we all know, that's ridiculous. It's just an opinion of his. And I'll tell you whose PR is going out there and making sure that they look good and sending out stuff to some of the other wrestling journalists out there. And it's not AEW. That's all I will say on that. But nonetheless, quite a bit of feedback. People did enjoy me losing my mind. That always seems to be a common thing of me losing my mind. Really entertains people. In fact, I did tune in. I listened to your episode with Matt Robinson there of Tall Can Audio. That little bonus piece, and you hyping up the SummerSlam card. And I heard Matt say that he enjoyed CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, and also enjoyed Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan. And I had enough. I said, no way. There's no possible way that he did. So I'm here to announce at this point, at today, that I will be on Tall Can Audio's podcast.
What?
Later this week. Yes, I will be.
What? This is a bombshell. That's my show.
I'm coming into your territory, Lee, and I'm going on to Tall Can Audio. We are recording an episode later this week.
Wow.
Yes. So, in fact, I'm going to be there in person too. I will be confronting Matt face to face.
That is like me walking into Belleville and interviewing the same 2 or 3 people that you interview all the time for your news stuff.
Whoa! Hey, now wait a minute.
Like, I didn't invade your territory like that. 2 or 3 people that you talk to for every news item ever in Bell Vegas.
This is Scott Hall showing up on Nitro right now. That's what's going on. So yes, I am going to be on Tall Can Audio, so I'm really looking forward to it.
This is I knew you had a couple of bombshells, but this one, oh my God. More importantly, I thought I was pretty good. I stopped him, and it's his show. I'm in his territory. It's his show.
Yeah.
And there I am stopping him going, wait a minute. You could not have enjoyed that. Like I was there to protect the This Is Wrestling Zach McGibbon brand. And now look what you've done. Look what you've done.
No, I do have to admit, I was sitting there, and it's the rare occasion where I'm hooting and hollering saying, yes, Lee, take it to him. Yes. It was not a good show. Do it. I was on your side. But yes, they will be on Tall Can Audio.
You couldn't take it anymore and said, I got to reach out to this guy. All right. Well, we'll see when you get there.
Yeah.
How many stones you have. Now, speaking of stones, before we move on, we have a lot to get to. The unfortunate passing of Kevin Sullivan. We'll talk about his influence in the world of professional wrestling, which was a lot. We'll get to some AEW and post SummerSlam WWE. What is the new name going to be of the Judgment Day, and is it going to be Street Trash? Because if it is, it's getting from bad to worse. But speaking of stones, number one, want to say congratulations. First of all, the stones being given to Krisha, who decided to take the plunge with our own Le Champion for the rest of her life. As the Champion, Chris Thompson, got married as we record this yesterday in Carlton Place, and to his beautiful bride, Krisha. I still can't believe she did it. I was sitting there and I saw him like right before the wedding. It was like 10 minutes before the ceremony. And he's like, it's been a little hectic. Krisha hasn't been feeling well all day long. I'm like, dude, she's marrying you. Who would feel okay? I'm like 10 minutes before the wedding. I'm like, I'm getting right into it. Like, I don't care. But then what a great day yesterday for the both of them. It was the opposite of SummerSlam. It was flawless. It was
no run-ins or anything like that.
No, well, maybe just I'll lead up to it, but flawless ceremony in, like I said, the Grand Hotel in Carlton Place. It's very old and quaint. I should get a year on the Grand Hotel because it is one of those like historic buildings that you kind of read about. But it was incredible. The ceremony was beautiful. They got their pictures in the middle, like in between the rain, and one of the best meals I've ever had at a wedding, maybe the best. Just an incredible meal. So much to talk about, some great speeches. Now there was a running joke at the wedding about kind of the over under on, a couple of tears maybe being had by Le Champion. Not the bride, just him. And there's a running joke about it, and I think at one point the bride's father in the middle of the speeches was like, Chris, you've well passed the over. I've won the bet. Like, get on with it now. I feel like I would have said that, but I didn't want to say that. You know what I mean? Like, but I also had, a little bit of time to collect myself. And there's a picture that I sent to you, and I sent our good friend Ben. Somebody did a speech where they went under the table and grabbed the belt. There's a lot of Marvel talk and a lot of wrestling talk.
There you go.
WWE,
well, one of the two.
Well, that's what I mean. Like I Marvel's everyone except for me. But a lot of theme songs of people walking up to do their speeches in Marvel, and I know there were watches given out that had the Avengers logo inscribed into the back of the watches, and a whole bunch of stuff. But at one point there he is, and he's got the belt, the WWE belt, and he's holding it up, and he really is kind of the head of the table. He did not start his speech with "acknowledge me," which is a little disappointing. I mentioned it to him, and he said he did want to stay married for more than like 12 hours, so he didn't do that. But so just a flawless night, and you can see the love in the room, which was amazing to be at. I'm very grateful to have been there. And Zach, some of those big moments, you understand, like there's emotion. You're filled with, everyone's kind of filled with joy, and those are the perfect moments to make sure that you cash in if you do have a Money in the Bank briefcase. And I did send you a picture of maybe I cashed in last night. Picture of the champion who was just married like a few hours ago, and there I am standing over him as he's lying on the floor, belt in hand.
Yeah.
You know what? It was a perfect cash in. Like nobody expected it. I thought it was brilliant timing.
Yeah.
Sometimes, when Money in the Bank first started, you're supposed to be surprised by people cashing in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there were some people surprised last night that I cashed in, but that belt looked good. Looked good on me. End of the night.
You picked your spot well. You cashed in, and you said, "Brother, I'm going over tonight." That's how it's going to work.
And not only and look, I get it. Back in the day, and this is my ode to sort of, it was at the Grand Hotel back in the day, big spot. And back in the day, you heard about, but you didn't really get to see before the internet and everything else. Sometimes they would switch titles and do things at house shows that you'd only hear about, but you wouldn't really see. And it was kind of an ode to that there were pictures, there were things that happened, there were pictures, and you have pictures, but that stuff might come out later on.
Right. It might leak out,
Yeah.
By a source, not from us.
Right. Exactly. Like, yeah. I don't know how that happens, but if it does happen later on, well, that's kind of the way it goes. So we'll see if that leaks out. But a beautiful day, and congratulations to the champion, Chris Thompson, and his beautiful bride, Krisha, and just a fantastic day yesterday. And you always know it's a good day when they had that look at the end. Like, we're not drunk, we're not anything, we're just exhausted.
Yes.
Like,
yes. All the planning, all the execution of the day. Yeah.
And the energy, right? Of all day, and not sleeping probably very well the night before, and just the adrenaline. Well, the adrenaline wears off at some point late at night, right? So they had that joyous look of exhaustion on their faces, which I thought was fantastic. And so congratulations to him and Krisha. And so now we're on, before we get to some of the daily things that are going on, Zach, I know Kevin Sullivan passing away was he 74, I believe?
74, yes, I believe.
And I got to tell you, and before we sort of get into his influence after being a wrestler, I have to tell you, growing up and being a kid, I remember a specific story. And when you're really young, you don't really know why you do things. But I had, I loved going to the convenience store, or there's two convenience stores, and they both sold wrestling magazines, but one was a little bit better than the other. It's a little further from my house, but walkable. And I remember going because the day before I'd seen this guy on a cover of a magazine, and he kind of looked like the devil. And I just had this fascination, and I went back the next day and the magazine wasn't there, and there might've been a couple of tears associated with that. But I had this fascination with Kevin Sullivan because back in the day in the 80s, when you didn't get to see a lot of video, and you didn't really, I was very young. I was, 9, 10, 11. And trying to understand, if this was real. Like when you're a 9 or 10-year-old and you see someone really acting crazy, like doing some things that just people don't normally do. And you kind of think like, wow, this guy's nuts. Like, this is real. And he was one of the first wrestlers that I ever believed as a very young kid, before I started to understand the business a little bit, that I thought was real. I thought the way he acted, the way that he treated people, character on TV, I thought it was real. And I didn't quite understand the demonic character being so young, but I knew I was fascinated with it at some point. It wasn't like, oh, I think Kevin Sullivan's a great wrestler or any of that stuff. I was fascinated with this demonic character and what he used to do and how, he did have women and other people, and he had them in chains, and it was just so out of anything I had ever seen before until I knew it wasn't real. I thought it was for a bit. And I got to give him a lot of credit, because back in the 80s, and not having the wealth of information and the ability to get video that we do now, I was just like, this guy's in Florida and he's crazy and he's nuts. And that's kind of what I thought. And I always remembered that, because once I started to understand the business a little bit more, I thought how into his character he was in the 80s of legitimately trying to scare people or bring something to an event that people hadn't seen before. And that was one of the first people, again, that I ever kind of believed that was this person. So that was kind of my first introduction to Kevin Sullivan. Mm-hmm. And so, obviously as time went on and I saw him, in WCW, and then just some different points being a wrestler, I never quite understood. And then I was in my mid-20s, and of course there were so many, like, he was doing WCW and Brian Pillman and Booker Man, and where I really started to understand the behind the scenes things in the internet. It was just starting at that point. And always trying to find out information, like, I know this isn't real, but this is crazy, and I want to know exactly how it's going down and what's Brian Pillman doing. And so I first had this thing with Kevin Sullivan when I grew up, and then I tried not to watch Dungeon of Doom, but I had to for a while, and I thought he was really goofy. But then I started to understand afterwards in the mid-90s sort of his influence behind the scenes, and where I really then, and maybe you can take it from here, like I really started understanding that influence was with that Brian Pillman incident and the roles that he would play after that behind the scenes, and what a creative mind that he was.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you touched on, that Prince of Darkness character that he did in the 80s, kind of taking advantage of the satanic panic era of that time and molding into a character. And it's cool just to kind of go back and watch those promos, because they really are kind of ahead of their time in terms of layout and how he was able to present his character and getting people to believe, even though when you go back in that era, he never specifically mentions Satanism or anything like that. It's that allusions to that, and people believe that he was part of this satanic cult, leading this cult, and has all these followers around him. It was really quite something to see just from watching it, 40 years later or whatever. So that Prince of Darkness character, creativity.
And sorry to stop you, that's nuts to me that it's 40 years. But okay, it just makes me feel really old. But understanding, what people were doing 30, 40 years ago, that's all.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. It's I saw it as like, oh yeah, the 80s are getting more into the 40 years as opposed to the 20 or 30 years. But kind of taking that creativity into a more creative role. And as you mentioned, I think the majority of the audience that, at least today's audience, would be more familiar with Kevin Sullivan being the booker of WCW during the time when they were hot during the Monday Night Wars, booking Nitro, getting that established, working with Bischoff and other members of the creative team to get storylines over. You mentioned the Brian Pillman angle where, they're trying to put over that Pillman is crazy. You don't know what he's going to do next, and he's breaking the fourth wall. He's talking about, as you mentioned, the famous "I respect you, Booker Man" to Sullivan, and leading to him having that short stint in ECW where Pillman wrestles a pencil as a allusion to creative, and then eventually going to the WWF. But Sullivan is somebody that he's really associated with WCW, whether it be creative, as you mentioned, Dungeon of Doom. When Hogan first comes in, they want to try and recapture that Hulkamania era, the little more of the cartoony era of Hulkamania, and putting that into the Dungeon of Doom so that it gives Hogan somebody to work with, a bunch of people to work with during the mid-90s. Obviously, that leads to some pushback to Hogan at that point, leading to the famous heel turn for him joining the NWO. And I think another thing, too, with Sullivan that he'll be known for is essentially booking his own divorce when it comes to the storyline with Chris Benoit, and having Nancy Benoit involved in the storyline of that as well. And we know what kind of led to that afterwards. There's been the conspiracy theories after that, and obviously Sullivan has nothing to do with the Chris Benoit stuff, but that's been something that's been perpetuated since then. And so it's weird because I saw the news of Kevin Sullivan passing away, and I've known just from reports that he had been battling some health issues the last couple of months, but I don't know if this is kind of a weird thing to say, but like, he just seems like that guy that seems like a constant in the wrestling industry. You always hear from him commenting on stuff, whether it be modern day pro wrestling or being involved with a lot of documentaries. He's always somebody that's had a voice in the industry, and by all accounts is somebody that's well respected in the industry. And so it's weird to kind of come on here and say how he's passed. But nonetheless, he's somebody that leaves behind that creative legacy where a lot of those nitros that kind of brought WCW to the forefront of the Monday Night Wars were at the helm by Kevin Sullivan, and putting that big push to some of the smaller guys as well. Obviously, a collaborative effort with others in that WCW booking office. He's also credited with the idea behind Bill Goldberg and his rise as a top guy in WCW, and saying he's going to be somebody that's not going to talk. We're going to keep him in the shadows a little bit. He's going to go out. He's going to have these short matches, and then that's how he's going to get over. And he got over in a big way during that time. So there's a lot of creative elements with Kevin Sullivan that you can really give credit to, especially for that peak era of WCW. And it goes back to that time in the 80s where he's trying to find his way to set himself apart from everybody else, because he wasn't necessarily the tallest or biggest guy in that era. And of course, wrestling during that, especially in the WWF, but even in some areas, like, you had to have something to make you stick out. And the WWF, you had to be big, you had to be tall. In this case with Kevin Sullivan, he was creative enough to have a gimmick that had people latch onto him and understand more about him. So Sullivan passing away, 74 years old, involved with a lot of big time angles in wrestling history, the Pillman stuff, the Benoit angle, pushing Goldberg, being at the helm of Nitro during its peak. Dungeon of Doom, I know, is not necessarily the most fondly remembered era of WCW, but it was one of the introductory storylines for Hulk Hogan when he joined the company and trying to get him established into WCW. And of course, the stuff that he did in the territory, specifically Florida, with his gimmicks. So quite the career for one Kevin Sullivan.
Well, and one of the things for me too, that afterwards, as you said, kind of booking his own divorce, I think, look, it really sad, obviously, what happened to Nancy and the kids. And I don't want to go down a Chris Benoit story here for half an hour and what you think and I think and everyone else thinks. I think there's things on the surface that make him look horrible. I think if you dig a little deeper, there is some stuff underneath, but it's still a horrible thing that happened. Regardless, Kevin Sullivan, in the midst of all of this going on in his personal life, booked Chris Benoit to be the champion, and that just says to me so much about just separating, like, how hard would it be to separate your own personal life and the fact that you are getting divorced and the person that you were married to is now with somebody else and you're booking them as a champion. Um, that it's hard, I think, to be able to put what that might have been like for him. And then, afterwards, and you read a lot about kind of his influence. And I think one of the biggest things that has stuck out to me is the fact that how many people you're seeing saying that they would call Kevin Sullivan for advice, that how many people understood that he was a brilliant mind in the world of professional wrestling, and still to this day, so the day he passed, had the idea, the inkling that they would call him to ask advice. That's a when you've been in the business that long, you create some friends, you create some enemies, and you don't have a lot of people that end up respecting you 10, 20, 30 years later enough to call you for advice. And I just thought that was amazing, to read all of the people that still did it, like right up to when he passed. I think when you're a wrestling booker and you have the pencil and you had it for as long as he did in some different ways, you're not going to get everything right. And there's a lot that I've read about him that, understood that the difference between letting something go that can be successful as opposed to what you think can be successful, or the box that you write, the box that you have that you think are good ideas, and then the other box, like Matt Robinson's, that to have you on a show, the bad ideas. I think it's a bad idea, but it doesn't mean it's a bad idea just because I think it's a bad idea.
Right.
And the ability that I could still book you on Matt Robinson's show, that I've actually done that behind the scenes and made this all happen, with thinking it's a bad idea, just shows the level of where I'm at that Kevin Sullivan was at. No. But you know what I mean? When you can't just go in with predetermined ideas to think this is going to work and this is the right thing to do, and then this isn't the right thing to do. You have to kind of put ideas out there, but then organically let things happen, because the whole success of that business of having the pencil in your hand is drawing money. And we sit here all the time and can't wait to talk about it, criticize the WWE and criticize, things that we don't like, but it doesn't mean that they're not successful.
Oh yeah.
And for all the people that are listening that heard you, Zach, go nuclear, and I thought a very well proportioned take, a very even Steven take of 5.5 out of 10. It doesn't mean that we, number one, hate the product, or number two, don't understand that you can be successful and put something bad out there. Those are different things. And I think he understood that a lot. I think that you have to, as a long-term booker, you have to understand that just because it's not your idea or what you think is going to work doesn't mean it can't work.
Yeah. And just to put some more color on that situation, as you kind of touched on, that was around that time, late 99, January 2000, where Benoit, Malenko, Guerrero, and Perry Saturn. And at one point, it was also going to be Shane Douglas, but that ended up falling through. Those guys leaving WCW and heading to the WWF at that point. And and as you mentioned, that was a show of confidence from Sullivan saying, hey, I want to book you as our world champion. Now, obviously, the timing of it didn't really work out because they put the belt on Benoit at that WCW show that all of a sudden escapes me. But They put the belt on Benoit, and then a couple days later, he ends up going to the WWF anyway. That whole ordeal was from it was a threat from Mike Graham. The allegation is that he pulled a knife on the group, and talking about how he trying to reason with them, saying, hey, he is gonna put the belt on you, and blah blah blah. A whole situation there that WCW didn't want to get caught in legal troubles there, so they let Benoit, Guerrero, Malenko, and Saturn go so that they could just avoid any of the legal ramifications on that. But that's part of that era where Sullivan got the book back. He had the pencil, and he was trying to get something going in that period. It's a little bit after Russo leaves the first time, and Bischoff is just about gone, and they're trying to do the rebuild in 2000. And obviously, the reason why they had distrust in the case of the Radicals, specifically Benoit, is because they didn't trust Sullivan in terms of what he, use the booking favors to try and politically get back at him. And so, but obviously, as a show of confidence, they put the belt on Benoit, and then they walked. But I think, again, as you kind of touched on there, that's just Sullivan trying to put business above everything else when it comes to pro wrestling, and saying, hey, we know that Benoit and Guerrero specifically were guys that they wanted to elevate because they had just been stuck in that mid-card for WCW for so long, and it seemed like there was no way to get past that into that upper echelon. That was Sullivan saying, hey, this is our chance to get you into the upper echelon. Obviously, it didn't work out there. But as you mentioned, kind of Sullivan continued to be a guy that people would seek out to for advice. He was still doing stuff with Ring of Honor in the late 2010s. So he was always very active in the industry and always giving critiques and chats and doing conventions and speaking with fans. He always seemed to be somebody that really went out of his way to engage with folks and keep a level head about the industry. So again, a sad loss for the industry.
All right, let's move on to some of the things that people said about you, because we'd be here all day if we didn't get to like all of them, but just some of the things, Zach, that people have said about you when it comes to the SummerSlam review and a little bit of the fallout. We did see Roman Reigns come back on SmackDown this Friday. We saw kind of the fallout a little bit. We got a couple of matches booked already for the Bash in Berlin, and so let's get to some of the thoughts that people had about your take and what you've seen kind of in the fallout this week from Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, in terms of just from my takes of SummerSlam this past week, which again people can go back and listen to if they want to hear all about it. I think it was for the hour and a half episode, I think it was about an hour 25 of me just losing my mind about this show and all the things that were wrong with it in my eyes, which was a lot. The one thing I touched on it at the start, but of course you had the folks thinking that I was trying to defend AEW or something like that, which is just the common call at this point if you put any sort of criticism for any company. If I criticize AEW, I'm a WWE shill. If I criticize WWE, I'm an AEW shill. I'm just calling them how I see them. As you know, Lee, I see things, and if I like it, I'm going to tell you I liked it. If I see things that I don't like, I'm going to tell you if I don't like it. I think that's pretty simple. I got no agenda here. We're here to review wrestling, and I believe people listen in because they want our honest takes on stuff and how we break down stuff. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you if I like something, if I like what AEW is doing, if I like what WWE is doing. So I just want to make mention of that. There were some feedback where I had people that came back and said they really enjoyed the rant. They still enjoyed the show, but the points that we made, really, they thought those were good points that were made, and they understood where we were coming from. Of course, being accused of being an AEW shill, which again, I don't think I mentioned AEW. You or I mentioned AEW once during that review. I think we just, me specifically, went just scorched earth on the show. And so, yeah, that was mainly the feedback, and then I did have people that enjoyed it and enjoyed the rant and said they really liked how stuff was broken down. So I got a real range of stuff. Clearly, if you were a WWE fan, I think you would have liked this more than I would, because it would fit your sensibilities. That's my understanding. They like the angles that they pulled off. They like the entertainment aspect. I heard you talk with Matt about that as well. About certain entertainment elements of it, and I can understand from a storytelling standpoint with WWE, where they haven't gone from point A to point B to point C for a long time when Vince was under the helm. So to see this company go from point A to point B to point C is refreshing for an audience that has been watching this company for so long. But my whole thing is, don't mistake competency with excellence. You know, like, just because they're doing competent storytelling, and the storytelling is better in WWE under Triple H than it is under Vince McMahon. I'm not going to disagree with that. I could go back to 2019 when we started this podcast and that era of WWE, and it was a bad era of WWE. I think as time moves on, more people are realizing just how bad creatively that company was in and how desperately they needed a shift in terms of a creative focus and who was at the helm. But of course, with it being Vince, that was not going to be the case. So I acknowledge that this is a better era of WWE storytelling than it is in the last couple of years. But that doesn't mean I can just sit here and tell you everything's excellent, everything's great. I'm still going to break it down. And if you're going to talk about stories and you're going to talk about storytelling, well, I'm going to break it down from a storytelling aspect and the way that they got there. And I've mentioned it on the show before, and we've touched on it before. I'm pretty close to a wrestling purist as you could get. I have this crazy notion that the pro wrestling aspect of pro wrestling should be prominent, which I know is a crazy take, but I don't think angles should support the wrestling. They shouldn't be the wrestling in my mind. And I think right now, when it comes to WWE's product and the way that they market it to their audience, they present it where the angles are the wrestling and the stories are the wrestling, but the wrestling has to be part of the wrestling too. And right now, in terms of their in-ring stuff, they have talented wrestlers. I come on here and talk about Gunther all the time, and Cody's obviously a tremendous wrestler as well. These guys that could go out there, and Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, so they have the guys there, but I just don't find the in-ring is quite there. So that's just kind of my thoughts on the takes that are coming out ever since that review. When it comes to the stories that are being told by WWE, Roman Reigns got a big reaction on SmackDown, taking out Solo Sikoa. I kind of like what they're doing with the Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes stuff, where it's adding a little bit of logic to it. Now, you have to ignore, because the way that Owens did his promo on SmackDown, where he was talking about, you got to look at my win-loss record this past year, and I don't deserve a championship opportunity. While I agree with the storytelling aspect of it and like where it's going, and I think those two could have a tremendous match at the pay-per-view, all of a sudden now, after this past week, I went on the big rant. Who was it? Piper Niven, who hadn't won a match since September, and then all of a sudden getting a title match with Bayley. So it's like, now all of a sudden you're caring about a win-loss record in 2024 and how that's being, you know what I mean? So it's a consistency thing, right? And I understand with pro wrestling, there's things you kind of have to accept, the classic Irish whip argument, right? Like, an Irish whip wouldn't be something you would do in real life, but it's something you accept in pro wrestling. But there is a limit, right? So while I like the story that they're telling here with Cody and Kevin, and incorporating the stuff with Roman and saying, hey, if Roman's going to get a title shot before me, now I should go get my title shot, and having more of a babyface edge to Kevin Owens and adding a little bit more depth to the story, I like it. But it's also just part of the inconsistency issues that I have with this company. And so I thought some of the stories that they're telling here, some of the stuff coming out of SummerSlam, the way that they got to Gunther, Randy Orton, I understood the stuff with the King of the Ring, and the shoulder being up, and we were critical of that at that time, and now they're finally putting it into a storyline here. I like that they did that. Am I excited?
Hold on. Let me stop you. Do you think at all can we give them enough credit to think that that was kind of planned to use down the road, or is it that just happenstance that they are using a mistake to go forward because it makes sense? Do you think at all that was planned a couple of months ago because they actually had the foresight to go, we need an angle. When we put the title on Gunther, we need somebody right away for him, and we need a reason. And so we're going to go out and execute that reason. And the only reason I'm asking you is because Randy Orton has brought it up a couple of times on television, kind of saying in like a weird, I don't know, like true babyface, that's, I don't like it, but sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles. Like, what? You're in a major match to win a major, I won't say title, but the title of King of the Ring, and you don't get pinned and you lose anyway, and you're kind of like, that stuff happens, man. That stuff, like, you'd be pissed, right?
Yes, right.
Like, I didn't actually lose because my shoulder was not on the mat. Referee's decision final. I get it. Like, nobody reacts that way if they really care.
Right.
But the fact that they brought it up a couple of times on television already makes me, it's like, I don't want to give the WWE credit, but that's one of those, to me, they could lie and say that they did it on purpose.
Right.
Without anyone ever being able to prove that it was on purpose, because there's only a couple of people that are going to know. And I just don't know how you prove that if they say. Do you think it's possible that they thought about it?
I think when it happened, it was a mistake that happened, because at that pay-per-view, I specifically recall them like not touching up on it with the shoulder being up, them trying to avoid it as much as possible. So I think it's something over time as a happenstance where there's like, you know what, let's turn this into something.
Yep.
And turn this into a storyline. So I think I don't think this was planned from the start. I think this was just something that sort of happens. Like, you know what? Let's make chicken salad out of chicken crap here, and we'll just put together this story, because that would be something, as you mentioned, where Orton would just be mad right away, and he'd be saying, "Hey, my shoulders weren't pinned to the mat. Let's have a match at SummerSlam so that we can have a fair, clean fight," or something like that. Instead, they had Orton veer off into the bloodline stuff and helping out with Cody and Kevin Owens. So my guess is that they kind of saw what happened, and they're like, okay, we're going to incorporate it into the storyline now. This is going to be part of the whole build for Gunther and Randy Orton. So I think they just turned it into a storyline. I think it was just a mistake that happened initially.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I actually believe that as well. But you got to ask the question, because it is something that happened a couple of months ago that they're using as far as a legitimate storyline now. Like, because when Randy Orton says, "Hey, dude, you actually didn't beat me," no one has any, like, there's no question. He didn't beat him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's a really good thing to be able to use if they were smart enough to do it. I don't know. Like, you got to ask, because there's minds, if you can believe this, Zach, there's minds that have been in it longer and that are smarter than you and I that are actually in that company.
What?
Yeah, I know.
What?
I know. You probably don't believe that right now.
After watching SummerSlam, I don't believe that.
SummerSlam, but yeah. But again, we've always said that the most consistent thing is logic, right? Like, just give me logical things that, as a fan, I can follow and go, yeah, that makes sense. And when Randy Orton gets up, like, I don't want to see Randy Orton, quite frankly, in a title match. I don't think he's done anything to deserve it. But when he stands up there and goes, "Gunther, you didn't beat me, and I want my match," there's nothing that anyone can say. It logistically makes sense what he's saying.
Yep.
And I like that about pro wrestling, that when you give me stuff that I'm watching to go, yes, that makes perfect sense. Even if I don't think that that's the greatest match that should happen, I'm like, yeah, he's got a beef.
Yep.
Okay. Like he's got his match. It makes sense. So
yeah.
I would hope at some point it's good. Either way, I think it's good. And I just want to point that out, that either way, like if you have a mistake, but then you sort of capitalize on the mistake to make logistical sense, I think that's good.
Yep.
Or if you actually plan this from the beginning, which I don't believe either, but I guess there's room for possibility that that did happen, then okay, then great. That's how you do it.
Yep.
So,
but as you mentioned, I'm not sitting here jumping for joy that I'm going to watch this Randy Orton Gunter match, because I saw them have that match in Saudi Arabia, and if Randy Orton's just going to let Gunter wrestle his match, like if they go out in Berlin and they have a Gunter match, then I'd be a little bit more excited. But I saw these two have a match, and it was your typical Randy Orton match that you've seen all the time, and not allowing Gunter to showcase his skills or abilities. So that's what has me concerned a little bit about the match. The way that they got there, as you mentioned, the logistics, all well and good and smart, and something that they should do. The match itself, I mean, I'm going in with low expectations because I've seen these two have a match before, and it was the same sort of match style I've seen from Orton in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I don't have any... there's nothing to me that can say, wow, I'm excited about a Randy Orton match, and I don't even care that it's with Gunter. I'm just not excited about it. So, okay, well, we'll see what happens. Just a little bit more on the Kevin Owens, Cody Rhodes match. It feels very PLE of them.
Yes.
Because while I want, look, I don't mind the storyline, and I like Cody Rhodes and I like Kevin Owens. So I'm going to watch the match and be somewhat excited. It's the wrong term, but
engaged,
interested in those two because I enjoy both of their work. But it feels very PLE-ish of a, hey, let's do a thing in Germany where there is 0.00 chance that either Cody Rhodes or Gunther loses. I don't know. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I don't see Owens or Orton winning their respective matches unless something drastically changes in the next couple of weeks. I just don't see either guy winning their matches. As you mentioned, It does feel very PLE.
Okay, so, and with that, and I don't mind sometimes, you can't look. I do want to be conscious of the fact that I sat here and criticized that there were 4 title changes in 7 matches and 3 in a row at SummerSlam, and I don't feel like the value of the title goes up when that happens. Mm-hmm. It was just title change, shoulder into the barrier, shoulder, same stuff. I don't think it increases the value of it. But I also do want to go into matches with a question, at least, that it's even a possibility that the challenger could win. And especially when it's a guy I like in Kevin Owens. I guess my question for you at this point is, where do you see Orton and or Owens after this? Because it seems like Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes are going to go and steal the show, because I don't think Randy Orton, to me, can steal the show.
No. He could steal money at this point, but...
Oh, okay. You're a little harsh. But he draws money, so he's not stealing it, because people actually care about him. Whether you care about him or think he's a good wrestler or whatever, he is still a name that people like and will pay to see.
Fair enough.
And so I don't like his in-ring. I'm not interested in his matches, even with a top star like Gunther. But just because I don't like him and you don't like him doesn't mean that people don't pay to go see Randy Orton, and they do. And I don't understand it, but they do. And you gotta accept that part of it.
Well, look, people are trying to find ways to fall asleep nowadays, and so I don't blame them if they that's their way to get to sleep.
See, folks. This is where he just keeps going and going. So, where does it leave Owens and or Orton? And try and just get out of the you don't like Randy Orton thing. Where does it leave them afterwards? Because as a guy who cares about Kevin Owens, I'd want to hope that it leaves them in an okay spot, and I worry about it.
I feel like with Owens, the way that they've kind of had the bloodline hover over him in the last little bit, he'll have some sort of connection to the bloodline, whether it be going for the tag belts in the future, partnering up again with Sami Zayn or another partner. I feel like whatever is going on with the bloodline, Kevin Owens will be associated with it no matter what. And I think to an extent that might be the case for Orton as well. Not as harsh. I could see both guys just kind of challenging. You kind of keep them around in a mid-card spot as, solidified guys that are named guys that you could put on a card challenging for one of the belts, whether it be the Intercontinental or the US Championship. For all I give crap about Orton, and it's a lot, I think that wouldn't shock me if they decided to do a program between Braun Breaker and Randy Orton, if need be, just to kind of continue to pad out that title reign. So I think there will be stuff for them to do. It just won't be in that main event scene for a while, because I think this is them trying to pad things over until they get to that big Survivor Series pay-per-view. Yeah,
no, I don't disagree. I just worry about like Kevin and Cody going and giving an incredible match, and then where's Kevin?
Right. Who knows? I mean, they could do another, they could do a title rematch if they wanted to, and just extend out that program similar to what they did with AJ Styles and Cody. So,
yeah, no, you're not wrong about that. Okay, well let's transfer over then to a little AEW and trying to distinguish the real from the not real. I think they've got me fairly good on this one because I'm questioning. So I'm going to try to present it to you like this.
Okay.
With the caveat that, and if people haven't listened, I don't often recommend, because this is the greatest podcast ever, I don't often recommend going and listening to other podcasts, but I think it's really interesting when you can hear what people have to say, and you don't take everything for face value, but you kind of read between the lines and hear between the lines. Nigel McGuinness was on with Chris Van Vliet, and it was very informative. He is a very engaging guy to listen to, in Nigel McGuinness. So I left that podcast saying there is zero chance that Nigel McGuinness and Bryan Danielson don't wrestle before the end of their careers. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I left it. I'm like, there's just no way that these two go ride off into the sunset and don't wrestle. It's not that he came out and said that. Again, I think you have to go back and listen to it and listen to the backstories and listen to some of the things that he had to say about his own health, about and I bring this up. I bring Nigel McGuinness up because we know that Bryan Danielson's career is on the line at All In. And we also are hearing reports now that Bryan Danielson needs neck surgery again, furthering sort of he's going to retire here. And I'm getting this picture that AEW and Bryan Danielson and everything that he's doing and saying right now is leading people to believe that he's going to face Swerve Strickland in the main event of All In at Wembley Stadium. He is not going to win that match. He is going to leave his boots in the ring. He doesn't have a contract. And he is going to retire from professional wrestling. That's what everything that I read and sort of see what people are saying and how they're kind of treating it. And quite frankly, I don't believe it. So I don't know how that works in with Nigel McGuinness, if it does at all. I don't know that it works into a run afterwards where he is going to retire, but it's not going to be quite yet. What that looks like. Does he really need neck surgery? I think you could do a story that he needs neck surgery and tell the truth, because once he is retired, whenever that is, he probably could get it done. And you could tell a story that Bryan Danielson needs neck surgery, and it makes it seem like he needs it right now and he's kind of in danger, where it's like, no, he could wrestle for another year and he's not going to hurt it more. It's just when he's done, he could use the surgery to be even better.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to hear your take on Bryan Danielson, kind of what they're doing leading up to it. He's, having crazy matches with Jeff Jarrett, and didn't quite expect that. And it's like he's kind of on the edge. What do you think they're doing here with Bryan Danielson?
So I'll say this. When it was announced that Danielson was putting his career on the line at Wembley, the last couple of weeks, I kind of challenged you on I don't think they're putting the belt on Danielson. I think that they want to give that intrigue and have people thinking, but in my mind, you want to establish Swerve and continue with this title reign. But ever since they included this retirement stipulation, I'm now fully on board with you and saying they're putting the belt on Danielson at Wembley. So I agree with everything you're saying there. I think that they are working some folks a little bit. And we know with Danielson, he likes to work some folks a little bit.
He does. And that's the thing. Bryan Danielson's he's like you. He's a purist.
Yes.
And he'll go.
That's why I love him.
He'll go to great lengths in and out of the ring to give the illusion of what's to come.
Yep.
This is something that's in his repertoire.
Yep. I can think back to the time where he got his foot stuck on the ramp and he faked a foot injury. I could think of times where he faked a bunch of different injuries to try and get people invested. And I don't disagree that he probably needs neck surgery. But like what you said, I think it's exaggerated to try and get some intrigue into the match. And it's something, as you mentioned, where once he's kind of done, or he goes into that part-time wrestler status that I do believe that he will get into, that he will get surgery so that he could take that time off. And then once he's ready to go, he can go in and wrestle. But like what I've said on this show, I don't believe for a second that Bryan Danielson will ever retire. Like, I fully believe that at the age of 85 years old, Bryan Danielson will still somehow be wrestling. Like, he'll find a promotion and that will book him, and he will wrestle. I'm fully convinced of that when it comes to him. So I think he's trying to add some intrigue into the matches, and people are very much bought into him when it comes to that sort of stuff. So now on the McGuinness stuff, I again very much thinking the same wavelength here. I do believe they are going to get to that McGuinness and Danielson match at some point, probably at next year's Wembley show, and really build that up, because I think that's just a match that they've been teasing quite a bit, whether it be the barbs on commentary by McGuinness, or the tease of it during the build up to last year's Wembley show. I think that's a match that's kind of on both of their minds. And I think in the case of McGuinness, I have not heard the podcast interview with Chris Van Vliet, so I don't know if he had brought it up at that point, but I have a feeling that the way that his career ended, when it came to the stuff with I believe it was the blood transfusions with him that kind of put him out of the ring when he was Desmond Wolf in TNA.
Hepatitis B.
Hepatitis B. That's the one I was looking for. And so that sort of issues there. I think he's somebody, like a lot of wrestlers want to end off their careers on a high note. So I think in his mind, why not have it be against Danielson, his greatest opponent he's ever had, for those that have followed him from Ring of Honor in the 2000s, and have it on a big stage like Wembley in front of however many thousands of people. I think it just all makes sense, and that's something that he'd want to do. And
not to cut you off here, but just to go on that point, and I do recommend people listen to it. He's a super engaging person to listen to, and Chris Van Vliet does a very good job with him. A couple things though that really stuck out to what you're talking about. Number one, Nigel McGuinness has been in the ring bumping for 18 months.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's important to know. I don't think Nigel McGuinness would have been in the ring for a year and a half if nothing is ever going to happen.
Yep.
So that's number one, and I'm just speculating on that. But I don't know why you keep going back to the gym and getting in the ring for 18 months if you're not going to do something at some point. Then, second of all, he basically said there's only one thing for him to do, and it's wrestle Bryan Danielson. And it's almost assuredly like at Wembley. Like there's almost nothing else for him to do, and there's only one. Now that could change if you put a main event on a pay-per-view. If it wasn't Wembley, it could be somewhere else that's really special. But Nigel being from there, he basically, like, again, he almost came out and said, the only chance I'll ever have of wrestling is it would only be Bryan Danielson, and it would only be at Wembley. And if you put those things together with the fact that he's already been in the ring for 18 months, and the fact that if you're talking about Wembley specifically, well, you're adding on another year, right? Mm-hmm. So then it would be 30 months. It'd be 2.5 years of Nigel McGuinness in the ring, practicing, getting ready for one match. There's just too much. There's too many things pointing, and I hate to bring McGuinness into it when he's not really involved in the storyline right now, other than giving barbs, and he gives some great barbs even in the podcast. Mm-hmm. And they go over some of his great lines about Bryan Danielson that he's had before. But just in the way that he talks about him, it's not in the past. So I would recommend people to go listen to it. And look, he could be working people on a podcast or whatever he does. It's fine. Like, if that's what he's doing. I just didn't leave that podcast whatsoever thinking that there's anything else other than Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness at some point down the line getting in the ring before both of their careers are over. And it might be the last match for both of them in their career. Like, I really believe that. It could be the very last one. I don't know if they'll wait another year until Wembley, but it kind of feels to me like Bryan Danielson will go into some part-time, even if he does need neck surgery. Does Nigel McGuinness cost him the title shot? Like, does he actually cost him the title? Does Nigel McGuinness do they run kind of the same angle like CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, where you know, CM Punk, he's not ready to come back, but then they do an angle on TV where Drew McIntyre, you don't see it, but he like obliterates him, and now CM Punk's going to be out for longer. And they do the same kind of thing where then Danielson's out for a long period of time, and it kind of builds McGuinness up a little bit, and you can have that long wait until the two get back. And it doesn't have to be every single week on television for you to do that. So again, I'm actually convincing myself that he's not going to win the title now at All In. We've kind of flipped here.
Oh no.
Where it doesn't mean I shouldn't say it this way. I was 100% that he was going to win the title before.
Yep.
And now I'm not. I'm probably 50-50, which is awesome going into a main event. And which is what I said about WWE. I want to not know.
Yep.
I want to actually think that it's possible that the challenger or the champion could win. And I now believe that both of those scenarios could work out, where Bryan Danielson loses on his own and he's really disappointed and he goes to retire afterwards because he's so disappointed, and then Nigel McGuinness pokes his nose in it and doesn't let him retire because he beats the hell out of him, or Bryan Danielson wins the title, defends it for a couple of months, maybe Nigel McGuinness costs him the title at Wrestle Dream or somewhere else where, Swerve gets it back or whatever they're going to do, and Danielson has it for a couple of months and McGuinness is the reason why he doesn't have it anymore. There's just a lot to me that could happen, and it all ends with Danielson and McGuinness probably at Wembley next year. Mm-hmm. And I'm not buying into he's having neck surgery and he's going to leave his boots in the ring and he's going to lose to Swerve Strickland, and that's the last we're ever going to see of Bryan Danielson. He doesn't have a contract. He might need neck surgery. It just feels a little bit too much now. Like it's, for lack of a better term, Swerve.
Very nice.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice.
Good stuff, bro. Television show, bro.
So for me, that's kind of the big thing that I'm leaning into this week on the AEW side. Mm-hmm. What for you has, before we go here, I can just tell you that in going over some of the news, mm-hmm. I get so sick and tired of seeing Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan's name and Goldberg's name, and I know every week it's just, why are these people in the news? Why are these people in the news? They're not newsworthy. No. So what I will ask you though about AEW a little bit is sort of the MJF, Britt Baker stuff.
Yeah.
Again, it feels to me like none of this is true. I'm supposed to believe that Britt Baker, just coming back after being away for a long time, somehow has an issue with Alicia Atout, who is MJF's girlfriend, an interviewer backstage, and then she got suspended, and now they're basically saying that she got suspended and she's away from television, but they're putting her on anyway, and she's in this. It feels a lot like Adam Cole and Britt Baker are going to be against MJF and Alicia Atout or whatever in the future, and this is all a bit of a build. I just don't understand the Britt Baker MJF stuff. I know he came out, I don't know whether it was yesterday or whatever, and said that, like, for all the people who wrote a bunch of crap, it doesn't pass the smell test. You think I broke into a locker room and, threatened,
punched a wall
and threatened a woman and didn't get suspended myself, and like, come on. I think it's possible that Britt Baker said something behind the scenes that somebody didn't like, and hey, people don't like each other behind the scenes sometimes, and that's actually real.
Yep.
But what I do think, and get your comment on it, is I've seen a lot of things from Adam Cole lately, kind of teasing a return soon, putting out a couple of videos of himself, and it just feels a little bit to me like at some point they're going to get back to MJF and Adam Cole, and their girlfriends are going to be involved.
Oh boy, I don't know if I could get behind that story. But I don't know. I have a feeling that this is just sort of backstage stuff that's kind of come to the light. I don't see this as any sort of deliberate seeds planting for a story here. I think it's just sometimes wrestlers don't make any goddamn sense when it comes to like what they get mad at and what they don't get mad at. And so I think there needs to be some more context as to why Britt Baker was upset about something in the MJF Ospreay match and why it escalated to a point and blah blah blah. I think it's just behind the scenes issues that leaked out to Sean Ross Sapp, and it sounded like they were trying to downplay it. And I did see that quote from MJF talking about that incident as well. I think at the end of the day, it's like what MJF said. It's just what people don't like each other, and they doesn't mean that they have to, crap on each other when it comes to what they do in their matches. He's looking forward to her match at Wembley, and they move on and move past it. I just see it as sort of a backstage incident that kind of leaked out. So I don't think there's any sort of elaborate play here. I don't see at this stage with AEW and the way that they book stuff, I don't think they have the ability to be this elaborate at this stage of the company. So
I just don't. I'm a smart guy, and I can put 1 and 1 together. I can't put 2 and 2, but 1 and 1 I can do. And Adam Cole seems like he's on the cusp of returning. Can we agree on that?
Yep.
Okay. Adam Cole has a feud with MJF. Can we agree on that when he comes back?
There's certainly a program in place if he wants to go back to that.
And Britt Baker, whether she beats Mercedes or not, let's just say she does not, need something to do. And I don't know. It just feels a little storyline-ish to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, Alicia too is, yes, an interviewer now backstage with the AEW. But again, she did manage, what's his name in MLW? Richard Holiday in MLW.
Yeah.
She does have some experience of sort of being on camera and working angles and that kind of stuff. And I don't know, just feels a little bit storyline-ish for me, but we'll see. It's not a huge.
I got you. I could see where you would add those together, but I don't know. I just, when you just have a feeling, and
yeah, I know, but this is just, to me, it's a seed for when Cole and MJF don't like each other.
Yeah,
there's now a built-in their girlfriends don't like each other.
Right. Yeah,
and
there is
that's
that
all.
point. Yeah,
that's all I'm saying, because there's a feud waiting to happen. And now how do we just give it even a little bit more? Because MJF can run down the best of them and run down Britt Baker real good. And Adam Cole's pretty good on the mic too. And it just feels like there's an element there that, okay, we know that the two are going to be in a feud when they come back, with the added part of, oh, remember that stuff where they're like, their girlfriends actually don't like each other and got in a fight backstage for real?
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't you know, they're part of a storyline in 2 months. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But as you said, and people, I want you to listen to Zach, okay? For all the people that think he's on the AEW payroll, he just said, I don't think they're even that elaborate or smart enough to think like 2 months down the line.
No, not with this. No.
That's what Zach McGibbon said. AEW is not smart enough to think about this stuff. So people, you think he's on the payroll, he's not.
Not on the payroll.
He's not on the payroll because he's not even giving him credit for thinking like 8 weeks down the line. I don't know whether I'm buying in or not. Tony Khan has said that there's some very, very important announcements coming. I'm imagining those are TV deals.
Yeah.
That are going to be coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
So that will be interesting. And we know the WWE is going to Netflix, and that is coming up pretty soon. It's about 4.5 months.
Yeah. Sooner than you think.
4.5 months until all WWE programming is going to Netflix. And
here in Canada anyway. Yes.
Here in Canada. Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah. I should have clarified that, but here in Canada, and around the world really, except for the US. So, it's just going to be a big change, I think, and we're going to see some changes in the television in both AEW and WWE over the next little while. So expect those to come. Zach, I think that's it for today. And maybe, I know that you got a busy schedule, but you're even going to decide to grace us with your presence in the nation's capital.
That's right.
Later on this week. So
go face to face with Matt Robinson of Tall Can Audio and say, hey, how could you enjoy the CM Punk and Drew McIntyre stuff? Which, again, by the way, thank you for putting up the points to him about a bracelet. That was the heat, the crux of the issue.
I look forward to the fact that you got a lot of stones on this show talking to me, but then we'll see what you have when you're face to face with Matt Robinson, who dwarfs you from a strength perspective, from a height perspective. It's his show. Right. It's his room. Yep. It's his place. It's his studio. It's his everything. Yeah. So we'll see what kind of stones you have walking into that place.
Yeah. Okay? This is like I'm Kennesaw State and I'm entering the Penn State Stadium with the whiteout game. Yeah.
And maybe you got enough stones to go head to head. Maybe. But that's the whole intrigue. We're going to find out. Because I'm gonna see and talk to him real soon. I might even be in there before you. When are you planning on going in?
I'm planning on recording Thursday afternoon.
Oh, I'll be in before that. So the fact that I'll be in before that, setting all this up, if you think that I'm not going to plant a couple of seeds, you are wrong, my friend. Okay? The seeds are going to be planted, and now you're going to have a lot to live up to. But we can't. That's the intrigue about This Is Wrestling and podcasts and Tall Can Audio and some of the things that we're doing here coming up, because I'm intrigued to listen to Zach McGibbon and Matt Robinson on Tall Can Audio. And I you know what? Like I got enough of Zach McGibbon and Matt Robinson, to be frank, in my life that I don't need to go back and listen to them when I'm not talking to them on a podcast. But I'm going to be listening to this one, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
me too. Coming up later in the week.
I can't wait. It should be fun.
That's a good plug for Matt Robinson's Tall Can Audio, because he's got two extremely, great, gorgeous guests that are handsome guests.
That's right.
Intellectual guests.
Of course.
He's got a couple of absolute number ones coming up on this week's Tall Can Audio. Lee Versage and then Zach McGibbon. Okay.
That's right. You read the cue card correctly. I like it.
Yeah, I did. But that'll be it for this one. But we'll be gathering back soon. All In coming up in a couple of weeks now. I'm looking forward to this a lot. One of the cards I'm most looking forward to in a long time, and it is in less than a couple of weeks. So we'll be focusing a lot on that. And of course, Zach will take more heat on some WWE takes that he's had. But for Zach McGibbon, I'm Lee Versage. Thanks for listening to This Is Wrestling.